All right, a small confession before we get into the book. I have not finished the book. I am more than halfway. I'm about probably 2/3 of the way done. But I'm making the video because I think it's absolutely irrelevant that you actually finish the book. There is no serious character arc. There are no story arcs. How do you talk about infinite jest? I'll stick around today on Pucker. I'm going to give you the best shot that I can. Don't go anywhere. If you have not read any David Foster Wallace, this may not be the best starting point. This is his magnus opus, but it is by far the most complex thing that I have read by him. And you have to understand that when you open up this book, you're stepping in an arena with this author, and you are at his game. You're at the whims of his rules as he makes them, and you have to be very, very prepared for that. This is demonstrative of what he does best, and I believe one of the reasons that this is such a difficult book to follow is that it doesn't really have that normal sense of novel that you expect or sometimes want. You have to be prepared to be sporadic, to jump around. It's a mishmash of different thoughts, and if I were to make a conjecture, I would say that those thoughts span over many, many years that he had somehow woven together and compiled into this massive work of 500,000 words. You have to have some patience and be ready for what he is stylistically, and if you're not, you may not fully enjoy the book. So what I'm going to try to do is break this down into what I think are the most salient aspects of the book that make it worthwhile, and we'll go from there. So here we go. Let's give it a shot. The first thing is that there are no real chapters in this book. This is not a, again, there are no breaks that you expect or can have as a reader to give you a rest from one part leading to the next part to the next. In fact, I would say that what makes this masterful on David Foster Wallace's end is that it is very much what he does best, which is the short story. I love his short stories. He has a way of putting a massive amount of energy into such a short space. Of course, this is a compilation of probably hundreds of different short stories, and there is a main character that you're following, but there are so many different peripheral characters that he explores that it becomes less about a single character arc or a single story arc. What he does in his short stories is create a moment. These moments are fully impactful, they're historical, he takes you into the mind of the characters, he takes you into the history of the characters, and he does that extremely uniquely, I will say. There's no one that writes quite like him. The second aspect that you have to be very prepared for is his vernacular. And he is writing about a time and a place. This is in Massachusetts. This is in his experience as, I believe, when he was a junior tennis player at the junior tennis camps. And so he has this experience inculcated into his being. It's part of who he is. You just have to be ready to latch onto that caboose and see where it takes you. One of the strangest things about this novel is that it is very much fiction, but he is an academic as well. David Foster Wallace was a university professor. He was obviously a very apt mind at the written word and also processing whatever world he was living in. And so stylistically, he has taken the fiction novel and mixed it with an academic type writing. It is peculiar. It is sometimes uncomfortable. It is definitely a little bit more work because you must go back to his appendixes and look at the references that he's making about places, names, small histories, and that feels onerous. I don't like that per se, and I ended up skipping a lot of that just because it was so much work and it interrupted the flow of the book. However, it's unique, it can be fun and interesting. You just have to be prepared to take your time with the story and not run through it. It's not something that you're going to put on your bedside table. Now I want to talk about those references for a second, because those references is what gives you a glimpse into this author's mind. The personal aspect of the infinite jest is touching, and he's a sad story. David Foster Wallace committed suicide. He dealt with depression and he dealt with drug use that he talks about openly, and it comes very, very much through in this book. One of the aspects of that drug use is not through him per se, even though you know that there is some sort of personification of his characters in himself. And you can empathize with those characters. You must know the author's personal story to get into this book. And that is what makes it effective and makes it very touching and real in so many aspects. The other, of course, is the tennis. I am a tennis player. I've played advanced tennis, and so I can relate very much to what he's trying to get at in terms of the game and the descriptions of the game. And there are whole sections where he talks about the minutia of tennis, the psychology of tennis, the strategy of tennis, and the beauty of that sport from his perspective as an author. For me, this was a saving grace for the book, and I loved it. I loved it. In fact, I can't say that I've read any other piece about the game as well put out as he has done. He understands those details. He understands what it means to be out there by yourself, and the emotional stress and the logical stress of strategy on the tennis court. Absolutely beautiful. But in the end, you kind of have to wonder how much of this is David Foster Wallace and how much is just bullshit. How much is he making up as a piece of fiction? It's confused, it's convoluted, and you want to think that it's him as the characters in the book, but then some of the things are so fantastic and outrageous that you can't really believe it. That is the beauty of fiction. That is the beauty of writing, because sometimes the author and the real world is inseparable from that work of fiction. I can't really say which is which, but I loved it. If you're going to sit down and read this, you must have the right mindset. You must have the patience. This is one of the more difficult books I've read to get through. I didn't enjoy everything. I didn't love some of the writing, and I didn't see the purpose in some of the writing. But that is exactly the meaning of the book. There is no purpose a lot of times. That is the infinite jest. There are events that are happening all around you all of the time that only have meaning because you're giving it meaning. And he seems to exemplify that in the book in a way that is peculiar, sometimes inaccessible, and so you have to be ready for that and prepared to take on that challenge. David Foster Wallace, The Infinite Jest. If it's on your list, get ready. Thanks for joining us here on Punk Right. If you enjoyed today's content, please subscribe and like the channel. And in between, sit down to read 500,000 words.